Okay. Okay. Welcome back, or welcome to the Feldenkrais class for today. And to let you know that if you've never done a Feldenkrais class before, there is really simplest rules, and that's to take care of yourself. I will give you a little bit of setup, and the layout here for us is if you can listen to the lesson and if you want to look at the a view where the two of us will be modeling some of the movements as we listen to the cues, not because it's what's accurate, it's how we've interpreted it. So that's a little different. So I want to just make that point that it what's right for you is what gives you the opportunity to feel what you're doing. What can interfere with feeling is pain, fatigue, overload to your senses so that you're doing way too much range or way too much or way too fast, too much of a velocity of doing a movement. And the movements, just to cue you, are really micro movements. And my background as a physical therapist is I see a lot of injured people. And one of the first things I always bring them back to is how to explore very, very minute micro movements and how impactful or how powerful those are to help our systems unwind from injury. So we don't want to put you in injury for those same reasons. And so you want to make sure that what you're practicing here, which is a puzzle more like, and you will get these little movement variations with a lot of time to feel and sense how you're processing it. And that's how you will utilize the lesson in your daily life. It's not that you will find exactly what moves will make you do this, but you will, in my experience, as you play with these movements, lessons, you'll start to acquire a sensitivity that in real time when you're doing something, you'll think, oh, yeah, I noticed this about myself, and I hadn't noticed that before. That's the value that we want to try and move towards. So I want to encourage you to do more than one lesson, and the variety is there's just hundreds and hundreds of lessons. So I will try and pull those out and give those to you here. I also form the lesson so that I leave space at the end for two reasons. I find a full hour of these lessons is a little much, just like too much of any good meal. So we're really dealing with the way your nervous system can adapt to the environment of information and processing. Okay, so it's about learning and pacing learning. The other reason is I don't have you in front of me, so I don't get to see what you're doing, although the lessons are geared so that I don't need to. But I, as a teacher, process knowing more information, so I like leaving a little Q&A at the end. So if you can just keep that in mind, you don't have to ask questions. Sometimes people just make comments to say what they notice, and the group benefits from that because the setting here is that it's not one-on-one, it's a community. And that being said, I want to thank you for supporting this community and supporting Santa Monica Yoga because they're bringing this to you so that we can help all ourselves be in a healthier state in this environment. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to have you first start off. The mat of choice will make a difference the way the lesson goes today. I have got a soft blanket and it's less padding. That's just my choice. What you have is fine, but I just want to point out if you want to try something later in the day, if you want to just compare it, a sticky mat makes you have more friction and a little bit of resistance in some of the movements. So you're just going to notice that that's going to make it different. I'm also on a smooth surface on the floor, so I like that because I get to access, you'll see what I'm doing with the mat. I'm just kind of sliding things around and we're going to do something that's very developmental. And one of the things that I don't know if you saw what I put out there as a preparation for this, but we do know babies now need tummy time. You know, we understand developmentally the need for that because we have these reflexes that we have evolved as a species to benefit from ways that we progress in our development. So a lot of us can use a reinforcement to that. Also, sometimes we as adults didn't know that we skipped over parts of that learning process. So either way, it's good to go back to that. Now, being on our front side, which I may now and then say prone, which is another term of being on your belly side, may not be 100% comfortable for you. So listen to yourself about that. And when you need to, get off your front side and get onto your back or another position. Listen to the movement and just see if you can follow along that way. It's extremely valuable to learn that way. So I don't want you to think that you're going to get less of an experience. The only way you'll have less of experience if you don't pay attention to caring for yourself. Okay? Now, finally, last week, another reason this came up was one of the comments came that why do I make so many references to athletes or imagery in relation to an athletic move? And I was really not trying to capture the athlete as much as I wanted to get the essence. So when you look at the essence, and when I look at some of my elders in the movement field and I see the essence of their movement, the quality, the flow, the relationship to all the integrity of the parts as a whole when they do things, I think this is something we can all strive for and benefit. We do not need to be a pitcher for an athletic team or whatever. So I am going to shift gears because I thought that was a great comment. And now we're going to go back to thinking about babies and thinking about other species. This lesson sometimes is coined as the baby alligator. And I want to just mention one other point. When I was first introduced to this in that scope, baby alligator, I had a book that was Feldenkrais Lessons for Children, and it was from somebody that was an educator to children. And he took these different animal species and took the lessons, and he helped us use them in a way to create play and choreography that emerged this embodiment of the animal. So that was the baby alligator. What I found fascinating was not trying to spend a lot of time on it, is how advanced it really was. So we're going to tie that together. And I'll make one last comment. We will be using friction on our front side if you can tolerate. Now, if you have reasons, on your chest or whatever, do the best you can. But I do want you to feel the load in your chest and your belly for particular reasons, and I'll draw your attention to that. All right, let's get started. So a lot of times our lessons are started like this particular way. We're going to scan lying on our back. So I'll have Cindy start that, and you will yourself, and just lie on your mats, on the floor, or wherever you are. And remember, you can be anywhere, sitting in a chair, listening to the lesson, and still following through, just following it in your imagination. So take a moment and notice your contact with the floor, and feel how you're resting and where the parts are heaviest. You might notice where the weight is on your pelvis, where the differences are between one side or the other. And I'll give you a little time to shift into that. And even though it's fairly inactive, it's still active because you're breathing, pretty much. And so if you're breathing, there's motion. And so that can reinforce the feelings of where you're noticing some of the parts. So take a moment and just observe that. Observe breathing from not changing it. And that takes a little bit of practice sometimes, because we, as adults, are trained to do breathing things sometimes, and that default mode comes in strong sometimes. So just feel and notice where the spaces are in terms of not contacting the floor and where you are. And now just briefly follow along and sense where your spine is so that you feel where the midline of your body is. So just feel from the back of your head where the point of pressure is. And then as you trail down in your thinking and your imagination where the spine is, follow the curves, noticing when it changes directions, where it feels more and more connected to the floor, and then as you continue, where does it start to lift from the floor, and where does it continue on beyond that? So the way our spines are, they have a continual curve, and the amplitude of those curves depends on your structure and your habits. So now feel where your arms are and just note where your arms connect to that midline. So just feel where your hands or where the backs of your palms, wherever you're making contact, and draw them in and feel those two relationships to your midline. And then bring yourself to feel how your legs, starting at your heels, come in and move towards the midline. So now you have this beautiful stick figure. So I refer to it a lot because it is a one way to really kind of grasp what we call primary image, because we're very interested in how all the parts of the whole interact with each other. Now, I'm going to take that a step further. I want you now to think about your top surface. So if I brought the ceiling down to make contact with you, just feel or sense where would be the first contact. Would it be your nose? Would it be your chest? Would it be the toes? Just get a sense of the topography of that. And then now think of it like a blanket that's starting to just come across and rest on you enough that you can feel, does the pelvis feel slightly tilted to one side or the other? Now, the neat thing is, you may not know this, but you're going to derive some of your feedback from the floor feedback. So let's, for instance, see if you feel one side is higher on the pelvis. Doesn't matter. You might have found that because it felt lighter on that side on the contact. So just realize that you're starting to scan across your system in a whole front-back relationship. And then just feel your chest. And see if you notice, and if there's a history of any kind of shoulder or neck injury, as you sense this wraparound scan, you have a way to feel relationships, and by that itself, changes start to happen. And then just that soft blanket goes out around your arms. Just notice. See, is the thing about looking like this, it's more like listening. And when you listen, you can't talk. So that allows you to drop the noise down so that you can sense more clearly and let go of something that doesn't need to be engaged. And then again, finally go to the fronts of your legs and feel how that is contacting that blanket, and just feel how does that touch the top of your ankles, which tend to be a little bit more obscure. And in a moment, we're going to roll onto our front side, and you'll see if some of that imaging has given you a premonition of what that might be like. Okay? All right, that's enough. Now, let's have you gently take your time, and you'll roll onto your front side. And I will go in and out of doing some of the movements just to kind of clarify it. And as you roll onto your front side, I'd like you to rest your right arm down by your side, and just so that the back of your arm, so your palms facing skyward, your left hand will be as if you're in a push-up position, so your elbows skyward and your palms flat on the floor, and your face will roll and look left. So turn your head to the left. Okay. Right now is a good time to realize if this is something that's comfortable, and you can find something to prop yourself up, a blanket and things like that. So make the adjustments you need to. Now in this configuration, I'm going to ask that you let the left hand be as soft and neutral as you can. So if you have a tendency to reach your fingers apart wide, or if you have a tendency to clutch, you're just going to find what's neutral, because that'll be softer and easier to sense your wrist. And now that in that position, I want you to just gently bring your left shoulder a little bit towards the sky. So your shoulder's just going to roll upward and go down. And do that several times, and just feeling, what's that like? What's the quality like? And I offered you a direction that has a lot of different ways for you to cue it. So as you bring the shoulder up and down, however you're going about it, feel what your palm does, your left palm. Do you sense, by bringing the shoulder up, that the palm goes down? Now, some of these things may seem obvious, but kinesthetically, not always. And just find the rhythm that seems to not make your breath change. Okay, and give that a pause and let it completely let go. But keep that propped up position. Now, this time, what I want you to do is I want you to open your fingers wider. We're going to really kind of review that concept that we're this baby alligator or whatever configuration lizard you want to think about. So now in that configuration, what I want you to do is I want you to adhere that hand to the floor. And when you lift the shoulder this time, you're going to push gently through your left hand, which will straighten out your elbow a little bit. So go ahead, and as you lift the shoulder, you're straightening your elbow, and you might notice that you roll. And then the fun part is coming back. Yeah. So gravity will do that for you. And so you're just letting yourself interpret the movement from one direction to the other and take your time. And you might notice you may want to adjust your right arm. You might want to adjust other parts of yourself to make it easier. And in this experience, we want you to practice making the movements as easy as possible because it's an easier thing to interpret in our nervous system. Now just feel, how far does that go? How far does that relate to the ribs, the waist, the pelvis? And then come right back down and pause and just rest where you need on your front side. Now, with that same push-up position, just leave that in contact. Don't let the hand move. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to roll your pelvis. So I want you to roll your pelvis by lifting the left hip a little bit and rolling over onto the right side and then coming back down. Just like we did a moment ago, just letting gravity take you back. And again, can you use your arm to sense what's happening as you relay the movement and cue it? There's a timing that happens between the rolling up and rolling back in terms of pressing and releasing through your left hand. And just see if you can make that smoother, that you feel that the system's cooperative. So that means that the spokes of the wheel of your ribs are doing this wonderful cascade. This lattice of your ribs is adjusting. And let that go. And now, if you have enough room, just go right from there and roll onto your back to take a whole rest and relief from the position. Oh, there you go. And the pauses, just to remind you, if you've done lessons before, the pauses are to enable us to feel the residue, the information that kind of carries forward after we've done the action. When we look at how people are in the zone or are they really in the flow state, sometimes it's just random, and it's not easy for people to know how they did what they did right or correctly or efficiently. But what we want to do is practice having better sense of when we are in an optimal state, we are having more and more clarity so we can keep that relationship going. So just feel from what you remember from the first time of scanning, just see if you sense any changes, and then roll back onto your front side again. So your left hand is in a push-up position, your right arm's down by your side, your face rotates left, and you're back in that same startup position. Now, one of the things I'd like to do now is let's go back to the first thing of just lifting the left shoulder and just see, did that get any easier? Now, what I'd like you to do is reposition your left hand. So move it somewhere else. Just change it. It could go farther away. It could go lower towards your hip, up towards your head. And now in this configuration, let's do that opening the fingers. And let's keep the hand in contact. And now go ahead and press into your hand to extend that left elbow and let that left shoulder come up and back down. And Cindy's allowing herself to use her pelvis, which is totally, now that she knows she can do that, she can do that. And I want her to do a couple of those. I want you to do a few of those. And then I want you to relocate it. So find a new space. So wherever you want. So imagine this is a baby who is just beginning to want to get off their front side. And so there is a strategy that the parts can work together. And the legs haven't figured out how to do anything but to just rattle and jiggle. So to feel how the trunk is going to emerge these contact points. Good. And then one more position again. Each time finding a way that you're lengthening out the left elbow, letting the shoulder blade move and the ribs roll along their axis, and allow for your neck to be easily handled. Good. Now find your way back to whatever either your first choice was the best choice or whatever is preferred to get the best position, to feel how that makes the body parts roll a little easier, and you'll press with that hand again and you'll roll and lengthen that arm and bring it back out. And just noticing. And now that you have that relationship, feel how your legs participate. Good. And pause for a moment. Now, you might have noticed that when you pressed with your left hand, that was the startup point, and it started to allow you to roll, and the pelvis started to roll. You'll do that same thing, but now let's let the left knee bend and slide up towards your head as you press and roll, and then bring it back down. So play with the choreography of that so that you are able to optimize your timing. Just like a musician, there's a timing for the way things play out the best melody. So just see what works as you slide that leg up. And you can drag your mat, you can find a way to reduce the work. You might notice that your right leg has a roll. So by that is tighten up your right leg. Hold it still and feel, even though you are operating all these other parts, just one little cog in the wheel there can actually make a difference, and then free it up and let it be part of what you're doing. Good. All right. And give that a rest and roll back on your back again, please. So Feldenkrais lessons are a synthesis of neurobiology, mathematics, martial arts, and a variety of other types of somatic practices that foster this kind of updating of the relationship of movement. And movement is a way that we can entangle a lot of things. We sense our emotions through our body. We sense our reaction to our different states through our body. So often there's times where our bodies are reacting, and one of the things that we can do is we can be less reactive if we practice ways that help us, what we call down-regulate or calm the nervous system down. So that's one of the byproducts of doing a Feldenkrais lesson too. It's not easy to go at this slow pace and this kind of melodic, guidance without feeling that it's not enough stimulation, which is what we're tend to be, used to. Now let's have you roll back on your front side again. And place your left hand in the push-up position, your head rolled left, and right arm down by your side. Let's do the same thing we've been doing, which is to gently press with your left hand and roll your rib cage and let your left knee slide up and bring your knee towards you. And now pause there and stay in that position. Just let yourself find a way where that you can prop that system to be there for a moment. So there's a certain amount of load that you'll have in one side of the body. And now in that position, I want you to exaggerate your breath by bringing in a big belly breath, and then you collapse your belly. So you're going to squeeze the belly, and then you're going to open the belly. And do it in a way that you don't change the timing of your breath, and you don't change the volume of your breath. You're just manipulating the way your body goes along with your breath. So as you repeat that, you just keep moving the belly, sensing how that plays the ribs. We have you in this kind of configuration so you feel particularly weight bearing on one area more than the others. Okay, and then let that rest and bring your shoulder back down, slide your leg back down, and pause for a moment. Now, this time you'll do the same movement of pressing with your left hand, sliding your left leg underneath you, rolling the rib cage, but now start to look at your knee. Yeah, and then bring it back, and let's do that together now. So you will slide the leg underneath and look in the direction of your knee. And again, reduce your range and then you ease it back off. So now that you will direct your eyes, which have an impact the way the top of your spine's moving. And keep doing that several times and look past your knee and see the space beyond. And give yourself a three-dimensional space like that. What's in the forefront, what's in the background. Pick up the colors, pick up the shades. Notice which eye seems to dominate, if you can. Good. And give that a rest. And well, how about just rolling on your side for a moment, just to get off the one position and just take a little bit of break. So, however that position, if that position's comfortable. Now slide onto your back and revisit the space of your back, side, front, side, and notice how the two sides compare. So it may feel like a little bit of an eclipse, that there's a certain amount of shadowing in your spatial awareness. One side may be broader or larger. Those are kind of, they're even more clarity of how we perceive our spatial awareness. And just now, gently roll your head a little bit from side to side and just see what is it like in one direction or the other, and when do you know when you've crossed through the center. So just see if you can feel how that relates to what we just did. We often pause in the center. We often will ask and we crave having our upper back massage. And for many reasons, we don't ask for our chest wall to be massaged. But one of the things that is of value when you do tummy time or a movement like these prone positions is you're doing just that. The whole fascial system isn't just on the backs and the sides, but it engages our entire being, our whole self. So we're using the floor dynamics to do the work for us that enables us to floss and mobilize our tissues. All right, now roll back onto your front side, and this time you will have your head turned to the right, your left arm down by your side, and your right elbow in the air, right hand in a push-up position. And just for the beginning, just notice this may or may not have been your preferred side, but just feel how it's different. If you're a prone sleeper, you might notice that, the side that you tend to sleep on was easier, and you want to be sensitive to that. So if there's a way that if you find that this is harder, you're to really reduce it even more, because it's probably going to be a little clunkier, not quite as well coordinated, but maybe not, but just kind of fair, keep that concept around. And now in this position, with following your breath, bring your right shoulder towards the sky and back down again, and just notice that. And now that you've really felt many of the relationships, see if you can just allow that movement to cascade through you. And when you do it, see if you can even make it a little bit more fluid. So it's not a really choppy storm in your motion. It's actually just this really rhythmical flow. Find the timing that really, and if you listen to your breath, there's a momentary pause between the inhalation and the exhalation. So pause your motion to see if you can pick up that. and make sure you really let it go in a full path of coming down. Good. Now, pause for a moment, just leaving the elbow in the air. And now, think about the relationships that we've been doing. Think about how we've been orchestrating the pelvis rolling, the elbow pressing into the floor, the fingers splaying, and the knee coming underneath. So just get that image for a moment. And while you're collecting that image, be aware of what the other side of the body is doing to create that shape and that practice. So just think, if the pelvis is rolling towards the opposite side and the other arm, the left arm, there's something that may actually become unglued to let the process happen. So can you just give your exploration a chance to see what you notice, and that starts to spark a new way of thinking about how your body can just start to restore itself on its own. And now, just to kind of see, to clarify that image, go ahead and do the movement of pressing through your right hand, rolling your pelvis, and drawing your right knee, and then bringing it back down. And see if there's parts that become more in the scope of your whole body when you do that. And repeat it again. Good. And if you remember when I had you kind of coiled in a flex position or curl position, see if you can feel for that when you go into this, that you don't want your your trunk to be long. It's long, but it's not straight. So when you're rolling the pelvis, dragging the knee up, think about curling, which means that the chest needs to let you bend inside of it and then come back down. So I'll repeat that. You'll be doing the same thing you've been doing. You're pressing through the hand, you're dragging the knee up, but you're curling. Yeah, and you're letting your chest bend so in such a way that you'll feel your head wanting to follow. So wait on it and see if you can sense it, and then restart a new one. So you'll come back off of it, but let the emergence come from your entire pattern of your spine. That's it. And that it's like we're taking the two ends of the tube, and that's what it is. It's a neural tube. We're taking that spinal cord and we are curling it, because that flexor pattern is a very familiar pattern. We used it a lot, and it's still there, and we can use it now. Good. And each time you do it, soften your lips, soften your jaw, find a place that your breath is easily patterned, and let your eyes look in the direction you're going. And now you have a different field of space, because you're now changing up the room spatially for yourself. And open that curiosity, which really is an optimizing way for the brain to reorganize. And if it just is curious, and sometimes colors can be brighter, shadows can be deeper, because you may not know this, but you may have one eye that coordinates differently as a result of what you're doing, okay? And then take yourself back on your back again and rest. So I thought of something because it came up recently. I often ask my clients about their vision, and a lot of my clients have had surgeries, LASIKs, cataracts, so forth. And there's this option of having up close vision in one eye and distance vision in the other. And one of my clients / students has had quite a bit of Feldenkrais, and actually started to, and she had actually had one vision up close and one distant. And she started realizing, when she started to tell somebody that when she was doing a certain backhand in tennis or something, she started to realize that her vision got less clear. I'm not probably telling exactly the way she said it, but the point that I want to make about it is that she was, at that very moment, realizing some of the limitations of having that non-stereotypical way of looking, and it made a difference in how clear she was of the space of hitting the ball. So I thought that was fascinating because I'm not discarding that possibility of people having that kind of visual correction, because I think the nervous system does know how to adapt. But I think if we are still already in limiting roles of knowing what we're doing, we may pocket that range of how we do things, because we are designed for stereo hearing, stereo vision, and so forth. So when you are playing with noticing things in your movement, start to ask questions about how you're hearing it and how you're sensing it through your vision, because you'll start to let these senses start to have better communication with them, with the whole system. And that's how we operate. We don't, that's our navigation system. Okay. And we're playing with our kinesthetic, our movement system to work with those operatives. Okay. So now let's go back on your front side. We're almost there. And this time you will put, if you can, place your forehead on the front so it's in the center, and both hands are in push-up position so the elbows are skyward. And now in this configuration, what I'm going to have you do, we're going to go back to the left side for a moment. You're going to press with the left hand and roll the left knee up, but you're going to look over your left arm. So your head's coming off the floor, exactly. And you can use that right side to help you, and then go right back down and slide that left leg out. Don't switch sides, and we will do the same direction. So wait till it's completely finished. You're going to press with the left hand, start the movement, connect all the dots, and reach over. Now, this will not crank your neck if you find a way to use the stability points in your body to follow in the direction of support. And do less, as little as you can, but create the pattern, because it's about the pattern in the brain, not the joints or the muscles, the pattern. And just keep smoothing that out. And you can press your belly into the floor a little bit. You can actually push your belly. You know, babies haven't figured out how to suck their tummy in. Yeah. And now back to the alligator. Where's your tail? What if you have that long tail? Where is it directed when you do that? You want to look at it now. You want to look at your tail, and you're going to see, where is that tail going to the side? Good. And give that a rest. And maybe stay on your front and just put your hands cross one on top, run your, underneath your face, and let yourself rest that way. In a moment, we'll be switching to the other side. So you can start to, before you do the movement, start to pay attention to how you did it on the left, so that now that you know these little parts of the whole pattern can maybe come in a timing that gets smoother. All right, so now both hands in a push-up position, forehead on the floor, and this time you will drag the right knee up as you press with your right hand, and you look over your right shoulder, and you bring yourself back down. Again, find a way to discover what you're doing first. Your ankle's just dangling. It should, I mean, it's okay to let those toes touch something, so just whatever that means. And you might notice maybe it feels good to arc your spine to do this pattern. A little different than what we did before. So just see, is that easier or more difficult, or does it feel like it wants to round or rotate and arc? These might be things that aren't really in your lexicon yet, but you can still kind of go along with what you are thinking about. Okay, good. Now slip onto your back and rest again. And take a moment, noticing your contact. What's new? What stands out that is relatively new? And remember, it's not really landing on that answer. That's what's of value. It's looking. And now gently roll your head a little bit from side to side. And can you now, when you roll your head from side to side, sense the participation of the front of you? We give so much credence to the spine, but there's a relationship to your collarbones, to your ribs, to your abdomen, to the front side of the pelvis, all the way to the front side of the leg. So when you stand and look around over your shoulder, you're going to create a way that the map is clear in the front and the back equally. Okay, now let's go back onto your front side again. Hands in a push-up position, forehead on the floor. And now what you'll do, and I'd like you to just time this for yourself, but you will go from one to the other. So wherever you want to start, you'll press with one hand, sliding that leg underneath you, looking over that shoulder and reaching across, and then taking yourself down and switching to the other side. So you're kind of creeping around like this. And you're just dragging your belly, dragging your chest, staying as low that you need the support, but that you can angle, that the head gets oriented all the way through the system. Good. And each time you do it, each repetition is an opportunity to make it smoother, sensing if you're doing things in a way that's not comfortable. Feeling for remote places like your hands, your jaw, because you're prone. Your face is going to have a resting position versus vertical. Good. And when you're done with that, use one of those to flip yourself back onto your back again. And when you watch babies breathe, you're able to recognize how they're being breathed. Their whole system pulls the breath in. So give yourself time to have that residue, that the breath is trickling into the fronts of your thighs, to the fronts of your shins, going up through your collarbones, up through the nape of your neck, on out through your skull. Wherever you sense a place that's holding, see if you can draw in the breath going in that direction of that space. And obviously, that's more just a guidance of feeling for that distribution. But we don't know what happens on a cellular level. There could be a relationship. Okay, now take your time to transition. First to roll, and then to sit, and then to stand. Each step of the way, finding a way that you're smoothing out how you're doing it, what you're doing. And as you do the transition of movements, can you continue at a pace that you can organize attention to the front and the back until you bring yourself all the way up? And then once you're standing, take a moment and feel the ground match up to the contact through your feet. And find a way, first with your eyes open if you can, because that's really how we operate most of the time. It's internal to go with your eyes closed, which is great, but we really want this to be functional. And as you stand, I want you to sense where you are right now, how things are feeling, but now bring yourself into your imagination and think about where you're going from here, what you need to do, and bring yourself into a thinking process. Just notice when you start to think about your list that you made for yourself today, the schedule that you may need to adhere to, or the errands that you may need to get to on some level. Bring yourself into organizing your thoughts, but can you sense yourself at the same time? So practice that for a moment. Just bring yourself into thinking what you need to do from here, that the rest of the day. Bring yourself, are you getting into a car? I know things are different, so it just depends. Are you getting ready to organize something in your home environment? And then now slowly let that go and just look around the room and just see what that's like, and just see how much you still are connected to what you're doing, because that this won't just be a feel good moment. This is a moment that is clarifying something for you. And I think of it like taking your dirty glasses off and cleaning them and realizing, whoa, that's a lot easier to see through. Okay. And that's the end of our lesson. So hopefully you are able to spend a little time in that lesson and take care of yourself. And um, I'd like to hear from you if you have some things to ask about, or I have some skeletal models to clarify some of the things that we did and why we did them, or at least what my hypothesis or what my theories are, or why we do certain things, and why it's important to go back to certain strategic things. There are interesting studies that when people are in long-term hospital situations, it's not just all the things that we know that are, that decondition somebody, but there's something that's been said about the orientation of the room. They lose something because they haven't freed enough reasoning to have to scale things in a different way, in a functional manner. So there's so many things that we do. If I think of the people that are unfortunately cooped up in senior centers because they are, for their health purposes. But I've seen a decline in a family member of mine because she's not able to interact in her environment beyond just communicate by phone and visual screens. So we thrive on this stuff, and that's why a lot of us are craving to get back to doing things that are safely allowing us to do that. So, okay, if there's a response, okay, okay. Sarah, if you can, I'd like to hear more of that. Um, and that's a great comment. Remember, I don't know if you've heard this phrase, but Feldenkrais said, "You take the impossible, make it possible, the possible easy, and the easy elegant." And it gives me chills every time I say that, because I love the operative of that. And so if that was difficult but surprisingly helpful, you're really moving on that spectrum, because it's not impossible. It's impossible for some people to do that lesson. So in the physical sense, I mean, it's possible that we take it in, we can, clarify it. But for, like I said, if you haven't been on your front side for a long time, your imagination goes south in terms of even remembering that or thinking that way. And that's the challenge, is when we've lost that creative environmental stimulus, we lose our ability to move outside that. I mean, you think of all the geniuses that had to shift out of their work to go into something else, playing the violin or doing something to create a hiccup, and how they then solve these, puzzles or problems, because we need that kind of nutrient of motion and space and organizing our awareness. Thank you. That's a great product of that lesson because when you think about groundedness, and I don't know if you mean the completion when you were standing, that's when you felt the groundedness, or was it something that stepped you through? My guess is that you were stepped through because you were really intimate with the ground. And, just like all the other things that grounding really brings to us, is that there is a craving to have something to push against and to work against, which is why getting to the floor is so fundamentally important as long as you can do it. And the process of having the pushback, which is why certain props, that when they have some firmness, there's some value to that because it's a reflecting surface. And what happens is the ground surface reflects back into us. So we don't just have us against it. We actually have a surfacing of information that is reflected in us. And that is really, and I think that's what my teachers have helped me understand, that grounding is not pushing into the ground, it's meeting the ground, and it's resourcefulness of having that ground. Okay, so again, looking at great strategies of how you evolved the lesson for yourself. You can't teach that except through an experience. And so, at least I shouldn't say it so boldly. It's strongly taught better with experience, because in that particular moment when you had these aha moments, there is a way that you are navigating the resources as they arise in the moment. And so therefore cultivating the value, and that's important. And I can tell you from my own injuries that, in the moment I am sensing all the repercussions of an injury, but if I allow myself, and some things take longer as I get older, they test me on all levels, the gifts of injuries. But if I allow myself, I can bring myself back to recognize the value of what I will get from having to do something outside my habits in a way that is novel. And so I realize I'm a little inconvenienced with whatever foot injury that it's whatever's going on or whatever strain. But at the same time, I have a whole different orientation. I'm forced to it. I can't get in and out of the car the same way. I can't uh, put my pants on one-legged because on that leg, because it balances differently. All of a sudden, I have to really explore solutions. And what I find is, as I'm coming out of the injury and I'm in recovery, that I am optimizing a whole new rich system. And I think that's something our culture does gets robbed with when we're fixed too quickly, as much as we want to be fixed. And you can appreciate, I love the value of prehab, which is the precursor to something being done and then the rehab. And that in prehab is we are priming ourselves to be ready to move into a new dimension rather than just being shoved into something and then fending for it later on. So there's a really good discovery process, and I like the way that you track that information for us. Um, well, first of all big movements are a series of micro movements. So one of the things to recognize is to do micro movements, it takes a refined sense of coordination. So when you, and I'm going to jump around on this one because I've worked with a lot of seniors, uh, and I'm grateful for that because I learn from them every time. And one of the things that I have discovered when I try and bring them to slow down and do small movements, uh, almost every time they say, "Oh well, I can't." They're telling me they can't do that, and I'm understanding their reasoning is that there's so much of a need to be productive that and do it quickly and get it done. And the value's there. There's no getting around it. But the processing robs us of noticing how to be present in a very important way in the moment. And accidents are often minimized if we're not in an absolute direction to get to something. So in other words, if we falls, if you are able to be in the moment, and I've caught myself many times and not fallen, but clipped my foot and realized that I was able to be at a place at time and moment that I was able to group, reorient, look back and think, oh yeah, I should have seen that. So the micro movements have value in many levels. But what I was also reaching for was when somebody gets injured, if you have been in a process of training to look for these little tiny movements, especially in pockets that are probably less aware, you will start to allow the body to start to go into a state of healing a little faster. So I don't know, that was all over the map, but hopefully that gives you some value to that. First of all, thank you. And thanks, Cindy, because I feel that I've been I'm grateful for the value of the students that come to these classes because it is it is it's a acquired taste. Let me put it that way, and it has. I came to it purely academically, and I had trouble even then on a level of understanding. It just was not akin to the way I studied movement or improvement. But the from experience and doing these lessons and having the hands-on, which is a very tutorial way of getting even more clarity. And if you have a chance when things are more open to have a practitioner give you a Feldenkrais lesson hands-on, there is even more of a cooperative system of information because the person that's going to be working with you has studied enough in themselves that they are going to be a side-by-side guide. And that's really cool when you look at learning in a way that you're not being approached from here to here as a student, but you're here and here as a student, and you get to feel and experience those relationships in a new way. So that you were willing to come back and try it again and recognize what I understand for you to say is that you felt an interesting perceptual shift. And that will play out, I can tell you, later on to the day or when you roll over and sleep at night, because that stuff gets that gets held on to in the nervous system. And we don't think about, I love the comments that I slept wrong. It's like, how do you sleep wrong? But we get injured sometimes in our sleep. And that's the time when we need to maximize our potential to move in our unconscious state. So what you're operating here is how to work with your unconscious state in movement. Daniel, I had no idea. That's a big compliment. Thank you very much. Uh, I again want to thank you for that. And please, please give me things that you'd like to explore. I love ideas, and if you can either hit us up on our Instagram or my Instagram or Facebook, whatever, and say, hey, would a Feldenkrais lesson be good for this? And put it in a context of the function, because it's a lot more rich, and it's like I've had people like, I want to train myself to play tennis left-handed or something like that. I mean, there's all kinds of things. You really can be way out there and figure out, what lessons can we draw from that would bring some of that enhancement. So, thank you. I think we are time. Um, one more. Let's go one more. It's always exciting when somebody asks me to talk, just so you know. That's a really interesting question. So clear indicators that the learning process is happening. Um, well, sometimes there aren't clear markers and sometimes it's an accumulative. A lot of times it's cumulative, and one thing to think about is it's a process. I tend to think it's more pattern like psychotherapy, where it's some things emerge and you don't know you've been missing something until it emerges. And so when you are looking for what's been fixed, you're still staying in what your perception is already aware of. And if you enable yourself to let other things rise up, you'll start to realize the value isn't just moving well. It's thinking well. It's acting well. It's emoting appropriately, and being of service, and being in a mindset that you're following your purpose. And all these things are wrapped together about how you become more whole. So that's a good question, because I don't want to limit it to you're just out of your pain or you get up easier. I want you to know that it's a growth potential, that to leave it out there, and trust, because biologically, if you look at dynamic motor systems and the research and the neuroscientists that are pointing in this direction, you can trust that it is doing what we've evolved as a species to do, and that's to generate our systems to work more organically whole. And we're using the easiest thing to work with, which is movement, because it's hard to work with our emotions and other things that are a little bit more abstract and less concrete. But movement is concrete. And you will, be kind of, I think, pleasantly surprised when something shows up that you weren't looking to correct. And I'll just give this one example that I've probably beaten to death. Anybody who's followed me along has to hear it again. But I used to chew on the side of my jaw as a habit, an unconscious habit. And in my Feldenkrais training, I was concentrating, watching something being, done, observing. And a colleague came over and said, wow, you stopped doing that with your jaw. And I didn't know what she was talking about, because I didn't even know I did that. And then I looked at and I realized, oh my gosh, I had a habit that was, you know, parasitic or pernicious. It was just there. It wasn't serving me. It was making my jaw unbalanced, but I got rid of it. And I thought that was really impressive, because I wasn't looking for how to solve that problem, but I allowed my system to solve and create solutions organically, systemically. So sorry, that's not a very linear answer to that, but I'm excited that you ask it, because I think you're seeing how we should be asking questions about our potential with learning and growth. So bye bye. Thank you very much. Please come back next week. Thank you, Cindy.